looks like it's 7 o'clock.
Here, do you have the statement to read?
I do.
Okay.
We don't have Joe, though. Were we expecting? I think we're expecting Joe.
And I keep checking. I don't have any.
I'll send them a quick email.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started with this long statement, if that's okay. So, good evening, Hopkinton, and welcome to the July 23rd Hopkinton School Committee meeting. I would like to start by reading a mandatory statement. So, as a preliminary matter, this is Amanda Fargiano. I'm the chair of the Hopkinton School Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Nancy Kavanaugh.
I'm here.
Leah Batley Rafferty.
Here.
Meg Tyler.
Aye.
And Joe Markey is not here, I don't believe.
He is on his way in.
Okay. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Carol Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Jen Parson.
Yes.
Susan Rothermick.
Yes.
I think that's it. And I don't believe we have anticipated speakers tonight other than Ms. Rothermick, right? Carol, do you know?
No, I think just Susan and I, the three of us will actually contribute to the school reopening update, but other than that, it's just the three of us.
Perfect. Okay. This open meeting of the Hopkinton School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we are complying with the executive order that suspends the requirements of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternate means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature a public comment session. For the meeting, the Hopkinton School Committee is convening by video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting may also be broadcast by HCAM through one or many of its channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting meeting materials have been provided to members of this body and are available on the town's website via the web meeting calendar unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Meeting ground rules. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will invite the board members to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For public comment, we have actually invited members of the community to submit public comment via text or email to Dr. Kavanaugh, and we'll cover those later. I believe that is the end of our statement. So I will turn now to the first item on the agenda, and that is the Pledge of Allegiance. All those who are willing and able, please rise and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd also just like to make note that our member Joe Markey has joined us. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is recognitions. Do we have any recognitions tonight?
I will simply say that I want to thank the 36 members of our reentry advisory group, and whether those are elected officials, volunteers, parents, students, administrators, medical professionals. We have people from all over the community, and I'm very grateful for all the time that they're putting in, which is a significant amount of time. So thank you to them.
Absolutely. I think we would be lost without the dedication of that group. So many of you are on it, and it's so critical. Are there any other recognitions tonight?
I just wanted to briefly acknowledge the patience of the Hopkinton community as we all work very hard and scramble at the same time to put things together. I feel a lot of support and understanding from the community about the complexity of the situation. So thanks to everybody.
Okay, that brings us to reports. Oh, sorry, no, I think we have public comment. This is our first time for public comment. Dr. Kavanaugh, do you have any public comments?
I do. I have received 5 emails for public comment. And that text number is actually Nancy Kavanaugh's text number. So I don't have those, but I will read through the 5 that I have. And then if you could please remind me when we get to policy that I did receive also a comment on our policy for tonight. So my first public comment comes from someone whose name is Renee Murphy, I believe. And Renee Murphy says, so many concerns. At-risk children with health issues, realistically expecting children or teens to practice safe measures after months of being away, limiting the few moments for social and downtime in gym, lunch, etc. How do you find the balance? Cold season. How the heck do parents and school handle when kids come down with symptoms? Is it COVID or a common cold? What does the absence scenario look like? Take this home to compromised family members. Thank you, Renee Murphy. And then I have one from Denise, and it looks like her last name is Lowsley. Dear Ms. Kavanaugh, my comments are on the options provided thus far for a combined in-person/virtual semester. As a parent of 2 elementary children, my preference is for full-time in-person education, but I understand that a modified approach may be necessary to ensure social distancing and safety for all. In the event of a modified approach, please comment on the following 2 questions. 1. Understanding that children need consistent scheduling in order to best manage through transitions, I would like the committee to consider 1 week in person, 1 week remote scheduling for the cohorts. There are models to support this approach. This would help families plan work and parenting responsibilities and allow us to better prepare and support our children through these transitions. 2, please share the results of the parent survey. And 3, to the extent any virtual education is part of the 2021 academic year, how will the time be spent in the virtual classroom? How will that be comparable to in-person classes? How much time in a virtual class day will be dedicated to teaching online? 1 hour per day during the last semester was woefully insufficient. Will the curriculum be adapted to the online environment, or will aspects of the curriculum be dropped? Kind regards, Denise. Okay, then I have one from someone named Haley Wenrich. And Haley's is long, so it will take me a couple of minutes to get through it. Open the schools K-12 without alternating days or weeks or what have you. Continue to practice what is already practiced, hand washing and janitorial services as regular. The end, I wish. However, I realize this will not happen unless some sort of extra precaution is considered. So I propose this. Do not have alternating days. An A day and B day, or A week, B week, is way too confusing and way too much wasted time. Teachers will be having to repeat curriculum already delivered on A day to students on B day. This, in and of itself, will drastically slow the delivery of instruction and the amount of instruction throughout the year. not to mention the complication of one group will fall behind and the other way ahead. No way should that have even made it to the ballot. No alternating days whatsoever, instruction 5 days per week. Face coverings could be required in the halls. That's it. Once in the classrooms, tech labs, libraries, and all other instructional working spaces and cafeterias, the requirement should end. Once seated, students should have permission to remove their face coverings to participate in instruction, independent work, etc. Restaurants have been permitted to open and operate in this fashion. Our schools can safely practice what our restaurants have already been permitted to do. Face coverings while moving about waiting to be seated, once seated, permission to remove. All instruction time can be filmed and put online for those who are not allowed to attend school. They will be responsible to attend to instruction and to complete the same assignments as if they were in school. Or for those students not allowed to attend school and for those teachers who do not feel safe entering back into the building to teach, group them all together to follow the online teaching model that was put into place this past spring. For example, a first grade teacher who does not feel comfortable entering the building teaches all the first grade kids who are not allowed to attend school, and so on. I should make clear, I am not sure what options the teachers are given, but I can tell you that in the business world and in any other profession for that matter, if you take the stance you do not feel safe performing your job back at the office, then you'd better figure out a way to do your job online or you will be replaced. That should be the message to our teachers. End of discussion. I know from being an educator myself for 9 years, there are plenty of substitute teachers out there ready and eager to take a classroom when needed. We cannot possibly consider keeping our school buildings closed. Should not even be an option to consider. How do we expect students with 504s, IEPs, speech services, PT services, reading intervention, ESL, I could go on, are going to be serviced without access to our buildings, equipment, instructional tools, etc.? Not very well at all, and we would be doing the students and their parents a huge disservice in the most formative years of their lives. I really do hope, Carol, that you and the elected board will seriously use critical and rational thinking when it comes to making decisions for our schools. Please look at both sides of the science that's out there for publication and not just the science based on promoting fear. I do not have to explain that our town is filled with helicopter parents who parent out of fear. We cannot, as a town and as a society, continue to entertain this style as rule of thumb, especially when it comes to our schools. It's time to once again put the educators in charge of running our schools, not the parents. I understand at this point, my last statement may seem as a double standard, as I'm a parent and strongly encouraging the above proposal. However, my point is to take all into consideration, not just the parents on the PTA or this committee or that committee. I truly do appreciate you sending this email platform and do hope you take the time to share my proposal. Haley Wenrich.
Dr. Kavanaugh, because that was a long letter, I just want to make sure that the community that's watching, if they just tuned in, is aware that you are reading public comments at this point that were submitted from the community.
Very good, thank you. And I have two more. So this one comes from Adrienne Pletcher. And Adrienne says, hi, Dr. Kavanaugh. In reading the fall reopening facilities and operation guidance document released by the Massachusetts Department of Education, I took note of all the cleaning, disinfecting, and sanitizing that is recommended multiple times per day. Will our children be required to handle cleaning products? For example, cleaning their own desks with disinfecting wipes? If so, can we use a greener alternative such as non-sanitizing wipes or soap and water to reduce the chemical residue on surfaces and, most importantly, kids' hands? I worry much more about my children's exposure to known toxins such as antibacterial soaps, disinfectants, and hand sanitizer than to the minute risk of them contracting coronavirus from surfaces. It would be great if we could rely mostly on soap and water for hand cleaning and Ecology or Green Seal certified cleaning products for cleaning surfaces. Thanks again for everything that you're doing to keep our kids safe and healthy when returning to school. Thanks, Adrienne Fletcher. And the very last one on the list is Robert Benson Jr. Hi, Mrs. Kavanaugh and school board. As a parent of twin 10-year-olds in the Hopkinton school system, I'm hopeful of some of the specifics on what plans are in place or when a case arises when in-classroom learning returns. I feel this study, detailed here in the New York Times article on July 18th, 2020, does a good job detailing some of the concerns that we are faced with, and I'm hoping you can discuss what is being planned. He has included the New York Times article from Sunday. In the article, Dr. Osterholm states the bottom line message is there's going to be transmission. As the article details, the question is how are those instances going to be addressed? When a case or cases arise, are we going to institute testing? To whom and for how long? Are we going to impose a quarantine and for how long? Would in person learning stop? For how long? Would all schools close if a case arises or just specific schools? I understand it will be difficult to generalize a planned response because each situation will be unique, but I think a general discussion on the topic will help inform parents on the level of detail and thoroughness the school district has put into this difficult situation. If you don't have all the scenarios planned at this point, please just push the topic to a future school committee meeting. I wish you and the school board the best of luck in navigating a no-win situation. Robert Benson.
Okay, that's all that you have in email, right, Dr. Kavanaugh?
Those are all the ones I have in my email, yes.
Okay, I believe that Nancy has one additional public comment.
I actually have two. So
Oh, great.
the first one is from Casey Corner, and she says, question for tonight. If a family decides to go with a complete remote learning for their family, can they change their mind at any point of the year? If so, how would this change numbers and affect children in school? So that was the first one. And the second one is from a parent of a 6th and 11th grade student who has provided the name. I did run this by Amanda ahead of time and asked not to have it shared for privacy concerns. It says, hi, I sent an email, but not sure if you'll see it in time. First, Mass COVID dashboard is not updated today by 4. Concerning. Seems like there must be info they do not want to tell us. Cases definitely going up. Observing in-person ESY drop-off and pickup. Staff, parents, and kids seem to have trouble staying apart. This is a very small group. How can 300 plus people do that? It is not human nature. Also, not every mask is made equal. So how will we ensure that masks being worn are going to keep germs from spreading further than 6 feet? And even more worrisome is how will we ensure all students and staff are wearing masks that will prevent any germs from spreading further than 3 feet, since the state is suddenly saying it is okay to have kids 3 feet apart, when every bit of advice has been to stay at least 6 feet apart. And if kids through 2nd grade do not have to wear masks, how is it okay for them to be 3 feet apart? Will siblings at different schools attend school on the same days so that each family has the same schedule? Do we really want to be pioneers of in-person during this? Maybe we should be starting remote and seeing how it goes for other districts in the state and across the country. Concerned parent of 6th and 11th grade students. And that is all I have.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for sharing their concerns and thoughts. We're going to talk more about other concerns that we heard from the community throughout the week later, but I really appreciate people sharing their concerns with Dr. Kavanaugh, with the school committee, and those in turn are brought to the reopening advisory committee for consideration. And it is really important that we hear from people. So I really am thankful to have this engagement. I think because we can't comment on public comment, we now have to move on to reports. And I believe we start with the superintendent report.
Okay, so I will grab the screen. All right, so this is the superintendent's report for July 23rd, 2020. And this slide is a very late addition to my report for tonight. I don't know if people saw in this morning's Boston Globe that the town of Hopkinton or the Hopkinton Public Schools did appear there. Under that headline, school districts with complaints filed against them by SpedWatch. And you can see that the Hopkinton Public Schools are listed there and found non-compliant by the state. And I did want to address this publicly because I feel like the circumstances were very unique. And I also feel like Dr. Zaleski and her team were, very attentive to taking direction from both the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's special education leader, as well as our legal team. And so you can sort of get the gist of what I have here on the screen. This is the note that had gone out to parents, and this was the note that got us into the Boston Globe. So I did want to share it with people because I think that as COVID set in March, that's a very busy season in special education. We do a lot of annual meetings at that point in time. And so I know our special education team throughout the district was very nervous that we were going to have difficulty meeting some of our deadlines in the spring, because when we shut down on March 10th, it wasn't until Governor Baker's executive order dated April 21st. And that was, prohibiting in-person instruction and education. And so he finally allowed us to be able to do meetings remotely, which was terrific. But throughout that time, we wondered if we were going to start to become, in violation of some of those timelines, really to no fault of our own. So we did have a sentence in a letter that had gone out to families. The sentence is highlighted in yellow at the bottom. It says, parents and guardians agree to excuse the district from strict performance of IEP timelines which are not feasible pursuant to governmental directives arising from or related to COVID-19 pandemic issues. I just want to point out that it does say strict performance. We had every intention of carrying out every annual meeting or every IEP meeting necessary for our kids to be successful. I just wanted the community to really understand that there was absolutely no malintent on the part of our special education team, and that we were really doing what was advised to us from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, as well as our legal counsel. So that's just out there, and I'm not exactly sure that the Globe article is as forthcoming as we might have wanted it to be. I do have some enrollment number update. I put in the numbers that we saw on July 7th, 2020, and I included them because you can see that at that point in time, we had 209 students who were approved for kindergarten. Our overall numbers, K to 12, were 3,817. And if you included Keefe Tech and Norfolk and the charter schools and our out of district students, we were at 3,973. And you had probably been watching each week or every other week when we showed these updates that the numbers were not changing markedly. But as you can see, in the 2-week period from July 7th to July 21st, we have increased that number by 15. So we are now at 3,832 subtotals for K to 12. And when we add in anyone who is at, one of the vocational schools or charter schools, or who has an out of district placement, we're at 3,988. And my prediction is that in those couple of weeks between August 1st and August 15th, we're going to see what we see every year. And that's going to be kind of that great, big, enormous increase that takes place. You saw the kindergarten enrollment on the previous slide. That has crept right up to 215 students who are approved, with 11 pending at this point in time. So the current enrollment across kindergarten at this point is 263 students, and I imagine we're going to see those numbers get much bigger. What's happening with reentry planning? I'll just give you this at a 30,000-foot view, because you know that we're going to have an extensive presentation on that topic tonight. On July 7th, we had our first meeting of the Reentry Advisory Group. Between the 7th and the 14th, we had several meetings of the Reentry Advisory Group subcommittees. On the 21st, we had our second meeting of the Reentry Advisory Group. We will be meeting again next Tuesday on July 28th to make all of those participants aware of the plan that will be submitted to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education on the 31st, and you can see that that's the last date on our timeline. The four sort of major groups that we have been working on scheduling, curriculum, health and safety, and transportation. As I said in the previous slide, July 31st is the tentative plan for submission to DESE, and August 10th is the final plan submission to the department. For people who are interested, they can follow the HCAM live broadcast that happen on Tuesdays at 2 o'clock. They're doing a little bit of a segment entitled Ask the Superintendent. We had our first one last Tuesday, and it was, I think, nicely attended and viewed. Just a quick update on our diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, and anti-racism work in the district. The Hopkinton Freedom Team held its first meeting on Wednesday, July 15th. In attendance were folks from the schools, the police department, other town departments. We had students, we had citizens, volunteers. So quite a few people were there. We have started an Instagram account so that we are now following the BIPOC students. I wanted to point out that Mr. Ghosh did a really nice job of, creating this really nice Instagram profile. I think it's an absolutely beautiful piece of art. We have the 4 branches that we are working on growing and still in our incipient stages, but I had presented those last time we were together. Our construction continues. You can see that at the Hopkins School right here, we have broken through the top floor. Here it's boarded up, but this will eventually become hallway. And at Elmwood, I actually received a video of this today. This is the old classroom at Elmwood, and they had that actually on wheels, and we watched it move away from the building into its new location. So it was really pretty exciting. And all I have left for you is to ask if you have any questions, and we are working very hard because the new school year is approaching very rapidly.
So anyone have any questions or comments for Dr. Kavanaugh?
I actually have a quick one. Just to clarify, with the IEP piece that you showed, if the timelines were extended, does that mean that the IEP was also extended? So it didn't actually what's the word I'm thinking of? So that the IEP didn't go away like it normally would if we hadn't had the meeting at that point.
That's correct, but I would prefer if Dr. Zaleski answered those questions because she's really the special education expert. No, our concern in the spring was really just that there were so many meetings to be held and so little time to do it in because we lost, what was really almost a month there, and we would have held many, many meetings. So I should also add that once we realized that that sentence was not an appropriate sentence, we took it out of every correspondence with families. We issued a cease and desist to all of the team chairs, and we straightened things out with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education as well. So I think now all is right with the world, but I really did want to make people aware that, it was inadvertent.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leah.
Anyone else?
Yes. Hi, Amanda. Hey, I wanted to just let Dr. Kavanaugh know I tuned into the Hangout Hour, and I thought it was a fantastic way to link up with the community. So I'm really excited that you're doing those weekly. And I encourage anyone in Hopkinton who wants to know what's going on with school reentry to tune into that or find the replay on hcam.tv. Those are excellent way of keeping people up to date on the evolving situation.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree. Another shout out to HCAM for all that HCAM does, filming us, making those venues possible for you. We're indebted.
Yes. And they are super quick on their turnaround. If you call them today, you can get on TV tomorrow almost.
It's great. So you're doing them once a week, you said?
Once a week, 2 o'clock.
There was another segment today that you filmed?
We pre-filmed something today so that, it can go out to teachers and families about and it was really Sean McAuliffe, who is the head of the DPH in Hopkinton, and Kathy Bain, who's our head nurse. And they really were just giving a whole lot of data about, the virus, how it survives on surfaces, how it's transmitted among kids, just so that people, I think, can make a really good decision as if they need that kind of data, what we're seeing in Hopkinton.
That's great.
Mm.
Any other comments on the superintendent report, or shall we move along? I know there's going to be a lot more discussion for the reentry briefing, so we'll move along. That brings us to the chair report. We had a lot going on this week with the community, so I put just a couple of slides together. I'm going to just share my screen if I can. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Okay.
Yep.
So community engagement, I already thanked those who sent in public comments today, but I just want to reiterate that the community has been so tuned in to the schools and the superintendent and the reentry advisory group. And it's been really, really important and really great to hear so much back from the community. So as you probably are aware, the school committee is hosting weekly office hours between now and the start of school. We have held 2 so far since the last meeting. We are alternating evening and afternoon times, and we have averaged about 20 attendees at each of our 2 office hours sessions. And we logged, for anyone who's curious what happens with those questions, we're keeping track of them in a log, and we're sharing them, making sure that all of us and Dr. Kavanaugh and her team all have access to your questions and the responses that we've given in case our information is off and we need to make a correction or whatnot. So we've had about 80 questions and comments come in through office hours, public comment, and email, and so forth. I just kind of pulled up some of the topics. A lot of these came forward in tonight's public comment as well, but a lot of questions around safety, cleaning products, and facility safety, and so forth. Remote learning, what is it going to look like, et cetera. How are we making decisions? Where are we getting our data? Hybrid model, what does that look like? There were a bunch of questions on the surveys. Can we see the survey data? What do we do if someone tests positive? You can see the list, transportation, athletics, and so forth. There have been a wide range of questions, and we were very fortunate that Dr. Kavanaugh made time to join us for the office hours just last night. So people who called in or tuned in yesterday got to have direct information from the source. People who attended on 7:15 had Meg and I. Meg is on the Reentry Advisory Committee. So keep those questions and comments coming. I know that they're important to Dr. Kavanaugh and the team. I will also say, by way of community engagement, I did refer one question to Ms. Rothermick about Legacy Farms North bus stops, if that road gets approved at the town meeting. Media update, for those of you who have been reading The Independent, you may have noticed an article that the editor has put forward on the Hopkins Elementary School name and the fact that Edward Hopkins, after whom the school was named, has been found or was known to be a slave owner. He asked for comment from me, and I'm just sharing, in case you missed it, the comment that I put forward on the school committee's behalf. I cited the fact that we all endorsed the resolution, the anti-racism resolution at our last meeting. And because we have oversight of school naming, and because we are committed to looking into anything that might be considered racist or exclusionary or make our citizens feel unwelcome, we will bring this up at a future meeting for a discussion among the group. It's not on the agenda tonight, but it is something that we can talk about and investigate further. NASC had 2 interactions with them. I think 3 of us were briefly in and out of tonight's NASC call with all state school committees on their reopening plans. It was a really interesting forum. I felt a little bit reluctant to jump out and come to this meeting, but as you can imagine, all school committees and all districts are struggling and trying to figure out the best road forward. Everybody's working to the 7/31 deadline to submit their preliminary plans. School committees, it seems, have a very wide range of roles that they're playing. In some districts, they have advisory committees like we do, where they've submitted a designee like Meg on their behalf. In other cases, there is no advisory committee and the school committees are more directly involved and there are weekly meetings. It really runs the gamut. I think the important thing for us is that we are well informed and we're working together. And next Thursday, we've put a special meeting on the agenda for Dr. Kavanaugh to come forward and give us the details of the plan. They talked a lot about the feasibility study, Dr. Kavanaugh, and the documentation that goes along with that. So hopefully that will also be shared next Thursday. And also at MASC, we will be talking later on about liaison roles. A question came up at the select board meeting, and I'm following up with the MASC advisors on the appropriateness of school committee or other elected officials like select board to participate in private groups that are not government sponsored per se, like the Freedom Team, which is not necessarily a town committee. There was some question among the select board members about whether that was okay, and I think legal counsel for the town is looking into that, according to the select board meeting. So I just put a call into MASC, and I'm waiting to get their guidance on that. I do know that I think Natick has a Freedom Team, and I believe there is involvement with the school committee there, but I just want to check it out. So I have that communication out. And finally, payroll warrants and expense warrants have been signed, as you can see here, and as are in the agenda. Any questions on that? Okay. So that brings us to liaison reports. Does anybody have any liaison reports?
I do.
Okay, Nancy?
So the bridge is getting ready to meet again at the beginning of August and looking to try to assess what the schools are in need of for our students who kind of fall into that area of socioeconomic need, who may or may not qualify for additional school assistance, but we try to catch everybody whether they hit that threshold or not. But we're looking to see what each school is anticipating needing. One of the needs that was identified early on is to make sure that there are additional masks for students so that kids have that same feeling of not being different from their peers by having different masks to try to get things that are age appropriate and I guess for lack of a better word, cool. So we actually have received commitments for, I think, close to 500 hand-sewn masks from different community groups. So that's one piece. And we'll be looking at school supplies as another area that we often try to support for kids who are in need in the schools, and to coordinate with other groups in town, that other community groups that are able to fill those needs. So that's all I've got.
Nancy, how do you hear about the needs? Are there school personnel on the bridge committee directly?
There are. Each school has a representative, and there's also an administrator in the group as well. And so we try to hear directly from the schools what they're seeing. Sometimes we're able to, very quickly, we reached out to Project Just Because and some other organizations when we've seen a particular need. For example, there was at Marathon School last year, there was a need for a couple of pairs of boots and snow type stuff, and we were able to get that filled quickly. At the middle school, we had mid-year students moving in who needed supplies, and that came from the school, and we were able to connect them with Project Just Because.
That's great. Any other liaison reports? It's quiet in the summer. Okay. Office hours, as I just said, we have office hours scheduled for this coming Wednesday at 7 p.m. And the Zoom link, if you didn't catch it on Facebook or email or any of the other ways it's been communicated, you can actually get it from the district calendar on the school website. So you should be able to find the link there.
Sorry, 1 p.m., not 7 p.m. this Wednesday, right?
Oh, sorry. Yes, 1 p.m. My mistake. 1 p.m. Okay, that brings us to new business. The high school construction award, Ms. Rothermick.
Thank you. You'll see from the memo that's in your packet, we put out the bid for the construction for the addition to the high school in early June, with submissions due at the end of June, July 1 for the general bids. And it was a good bidding atmosphere. We received several bids in all areas, sub bids and general contractor. At the end of the day, Avatar Construction of Cambridge was the lowest responsive and responsible bidder with a general bid contract of $2,839,000. We did a thorough review in due diligence around the vendor, in speaking with all the references, speaking with the state and all the appropriate avenues. The appropriation for the construction, as a reminder, is 4.5 million. So this keeps us in line with all the other pieces to the construction. The proposed price does fit well within the appropriation. So I'm just looking to be able to move forward with Avatar Construction.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Rothermick?
Susan, would you be able to comment on who were a couple of the other that you considered? Or is that not appropriate?
I could forward that along at another time.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, how about the firm you selected? Do you have, can you just comment on a couple of the other projects they've done that people might be familiar with or in the region?
I'm not sure that there would be anything in particular that we would be familiar with. Our OPM P3 is the one that really did the investigation. They've done a number of private construction projects and some different, I don't recall, I think they're called, the construction industry called them fit-ups for school building constructions. But I wouldn't be able to name them. Again, I really look to the OPM to do that thorough investigation.
Any other questions? I'm glad to hear that we had competitive bids, that we had a lot of bids come in. We don't always get a lot of bids when we put things out to bid, so it's good that you had some vendors to choose from. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I will make a motion to accept this vendor.
Motion
I will second.
Second by Leah. Is there any more discussion? Okay, I'm going to take a roll call vote. Leah?
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Nancy?
Yes.
Joe?
Hi.
And I'm a yes. So that passes. Thank you very much for moving this forward, and good luck.
Be a lot of work going on in all our buildings, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Yep. Okay, that brings us to Dr. Kavanaugh, the school opening update.
Okay, I will just grab the screen. That's the problem when you have about 1 million tabs open at once. Okay, so as I had said, the reentry advisory group has met several times. What you'll see in tonight's presentation is very largely some of the things that we shared with that group last Tuesday. And then I've also included some of the survey data because I've had a lot of people who have been asking me, could you please incorporate some of the survey data? We'd like to see, how things sort of fell out as they've been answering surveys. Just a very quick reminder of who the people are who have been so willingly volunteered their time to be on this committee. I won't go through them again, but I like to keep those names up there in the forefront because they're working so hard. And the very first topic we discussed on Tuesday was curriculum. Jen Parson, our assistant superintendent, was the person in charge of those subcommittees. So I'm going to let Jen deliver the information on curriculum, please.
Great, thank you, Carol. So we had, as Dr. Kavanaugh has already mentioned, a very wide range of people who were more than willing to give their time. That included high school students, educators, administrators, family members, paraprofessionals, and others who really were very giving of their time and their feedback. So we met with 3 different groups, elementary, middle, and high, and we had some common themes that we heard in each group. And the way that I presented this the other night, and I'll give kind of the same introduction here, is that there were many positives that were shared about how remote learning went in the spring. And I've captured a couple of those here. But our real purpose in the reentry work was to focus on how can we take what we've already learned and improve on that for the fall. So you'll see more areas of proposed improvements and areas for our growth as we now know more than we did several months ago. So at the elementary level, what people really appreciated, and this was with a lot of hard work from our technology team and our educators, and certainly on the parent end at home, was the consistency in curriculum delivery. Bringing in Seesaw, the use of Google Classroom was very much appreciated. And the coordinated planning that our principals and especially our ELA coordinator, director, coordinated made it a significant impact on the way we were able to deliver and develop curriculum. Our educators reported a great deal of learning. We talk a lot about how things move relatively slowly in the public school world in terms of how long it usually takes us to pivot from one model to the next. And our educators, and I think universally people recognized how quickly we moved to make sure that our students could have what they needed. Moving forward, some of the things that we've all talked about that really should be no surprise to anyone here. We need to really focus our attention on assessing our students for their learning and understanding. As we consider our return back to the buildings, first and foremost, we need to focus on safety and health. And equally as important, we need to focus on community building and kind of the social and emotional safety of our students. And those are really the foundational non-negotiables before we can even think about delivering curriculum to our students. We're very cognizant of the fact that our families are anxious for feedback on the progress of their students. It's been a long time since we've had that at this point, and we need to move in that direction, and that's how we're being guided by the department and how we're guiding our faculty. We are all in full agreement that the 1 hour of synchronous instruction that we were able to provide last spring was not near or will not be nearly enough as we move forward now that we know more. And we need to make sure that our families are supported with the technology needs. We have those needs at all levels, but certainly, our survey data show this. There's no preschooler, kindergartner, first grader who is going to access any remote learning without the help of an adult or an older sibling or someone. So we're very aware that families aren't just naturally proficient in Seesaw. It's just not in most people's vernacular. So we need to do some more work in that area. So moving on to the middle school, some of the things that were really validating to hear, especially again, thinking of the work of Ashok Ghosh and the tech team, the amount of professional development that was turned around in this district almost overnight was really staggering in terms of how much they were able to roll out, and the numbers of teachers. There were points where at the beginning when we had X number of seats in Zoom that not every teacher could even get on every training, and we had to run them multiple times because they were so anxious to understand how to best reach their learners remotely. Students, through some of the data that teachers have collected from student input, we're very appreciative of the teachers' commitment to making remote learning feel like a real life classroom. And they loved the activities and learning tasks that made them feel like they weren't just sitting on the other end of a computer. And again, that was a lot of heavy lifting on the part of our teachers who just simply weren't used to teaching in that manner. Again, similar themes. We need longer class periods if we are in the position of going fully remote. We need to think more carefully about the ways that our students interact with one another. So at first, when people were getting used to Zoom, the easiest thing to do was to get onto Zoom and to talk to kids the way you might talk from the front of a classroom. And we need more opportunities now that teachers are more proficient with how do we get students to engage with one another and kind of that discourse back and forth, because that's certainly another way that students learn and take in information. Again, family access to curriculum is critically important. The whole notion, again, of providing clear expectations for everyone right up front. How are we grading? What is this looking like? How are students progressing? And helping our students to understand the accountability measures that will be put into place for the fall are all critical for our success. And again, thinking about what learning will look like, especially if we're in a hybrid model, we need to start growing our teachers' repertoire of strategies for, how do I work with a group of students one day who are sitting before me? And then how do I promote the learning and move the learning forward on the consecutive day where they're not sitting right in front of me? So we need more professional learning in that regard. And then at the high school level, students were very appreciative of the support, again, that they received from their teachers during remote learning. They felt that their teachers were accessible and available. And that was very meaningful as, I think a lot of our high school kids took, a very significant hit if you're a high school senior and suddenly you're not there to experience that, really that pinnacle of your high school career. You need to know that your principal and the other administrators and your teachers are there for you. And they articulated that they felt that. At the high school level, where the learning is more on the shoulders of the students to maintain independence with their learning, our students especially expressed a desire for a more organized system of maintaining their coursework, Zoom links, files and folders of information. And that's something that we are working on actively. Looking for more student engagement. Students felt like it was difficult, as days went on, to maintain their engagement, and they're looking for more clear expectations to help keep the learning alive. Grading, all of those things again at the high school, feedback, accountability. Those are the ages again where students are constantly with their phones, checking their grades, having that constant access to how am I doing, and that was a big vacuum for students during the spring. And again, their hope is for extending the length of our class periods and for class time. And, again, I feel like this is repetitive, but helping our educators to learn more about the platforms we're using and the models we're using so they can be as effective and efficient as possible. And this, you can feel free to take a peek. This is really simply a compilation of everything that I just shared with you, all kind of combined together in really what we're looking for, which I think I just kind of shared with you.
Okay, so I did the 3 subcommittees on scheduling. I'll just give you the very quick report summary, and then I'll go through what that looks like at the 3 different levels. All 3 of the scheduling committees, the elementary, the middle, and the high school, met twice. So there were 6 meetings in all. There was agreement in those meetings that face-to-face teaching and learning remains the most effective way to deliver curriculum. That said, people were really sort of drawn to the 6 feet of social distancing, and people in the group even wanted some consideration for personal space. So rather than just have a measurement from sort of chair to chair of 6 feet, they wanted to incorporate the physical space of the human being occupying the chair and then measure out 6 feet. They realized that having all the students in the classroom at one time would not allow for full-time attendance for all students because you could never achieve the 6 feet that way. The scheduling committee also considered school functions such as lunch, transportation, mask breaks, and the need for us to have plenty of time to allow our students to wash their hands frequently. Several of the scheduling subcommittees wanted information from parents. And so as parents are wondering, why did I get yet another survey? And these surveys came with only 2 or 3 or maybe 5 questions. It's because those were sort of the burning questions on the minds of people in the subcommittees. In the end, while the elementary group, they really struggled to come to some kind of true consensus. It appeared that the AB model, where students were attending school every other day, was the favored model across these 3 groups. This model, people felt, best emulates the rhythm of the regular school year. So, for example, if I'm in school on Monday and I have some kind of work to do between Monday and Wednesday, I typically will get that work done. I engage with it. I come prepared to Wednesday's class. There was some fear that when you're doing a 1 week on, 1 week off kind of a model, there's a lot of autonomy that happens in that second week. And we worried that there might be some students who would sort of lose momentum in that second week. Daily disinfecting is possible in every classroom every night. We have the cleaning mechanism, and we are hoping to have the human power to make sure that that happens. We are thinking about what it would look like even to have additional personnel. And if we use that particular model, the AB every other day, with only 50% of our kids coming to school, that minimum of 6 feet of social distancing is possible. So just to talk a little bit about what each one of the subcommittees looked at, the elementary subcommittee discussed the every other day model versus a model where students attend in 2 different cohort groups. And there would be 2 set days per week for students to do that. So for example, students might come in, half of the students, 50% of them, on Monday, Tuesday. Everybody would have Wednesday as a remote day, and then the other 50% would come on Thursday and Friday. And these days were not locked in as the favorite. We could have done Monday and Thursday and Tuesday and Friday. But what we realized was that very quickly was that you would be attending school 4 out of 10 days as opposed to 5 out of 10 days. So you'd really be in school for 40% of the year, as opposed to the other model that was at 50% of the year. The reason that the elementary committee really wanted to look at that was they were very concerned about families and families being able to establish childcare. So as I transitioned to the middle school, it was interesting to me that it was the middle school people who asked me to reach out to Kidsborough as well as the Y to discover whether or not those organizations would be able to have our students attending on an every other day basis. So would they be willing to take families who needed coverage 1 week for Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then the following week for Tuesday, Thursday? And we did learn that they were quite willing to do that. The child care providers, Kidsborough, the Y, and other ones do seem eager because they currently get our kids at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Using this model, they would have our students every other day for full days. So it's clearly just increased business. The middle school group also discussed the AB every other day and every other week. In the end, partial attendance, which would mean that each school would have a start and a stop time that was about a 3.5-hour day. So for example, maybe Hopkins would start at 7:30 and they would be dismissed somewhere around 10:30 to 11 o'clock. Then you could bring in Elmwood, then you could bring in Marathon, then you could bring in the secondary students. In the end, that was ruled out simply because of space constraints. The attraction, I think, to that model is that you don't have to serve lunch. You'd also have to do multiple bus tiers for that one. And then the high school schedule, we discussed full days, we discussed partial days, we discussed the AB every other day and the AB every other week model. It was very interesting because the research is sort of showing that with elementary students not really contracting the virus or transmitting the virus, and Sean McAuliffe did explain that on today's TV show. So if you are interested in that, you can check it out on HCAM. But that wasn't one of the things that the elementary people were all that concerned about, bringing kids in really every day. So much as the high school was. The high school was very interested in just bringing kids in every single day. So they did ask for a survey that asked that question, and I will be able to show you some of the results of that. So before Susan launches into her discussion on health and safety, I'll just show you a couple of those slides. And I put this into the health and safety category because it really does involve the 6 feet of social distancing with precautions and PPE. So we asked parents, would you, and this was parents across the entire district, we got 2,615 responses. Would you send your children back to school with 6 feet of classroom social distancing, as well as appropriate precautions and PPE? And 63.9% of people said with 6 feet and all of those precautions and PPE, absolutely. 25.4% across the district said, I'm not entirely sure right now. And 10.7% said no. Even with 6 feet of distancing, the precautions and the PPE, they were not in agreement that that would be a good idea to send their child back to school. When we reduced the 6 feet to 3 feet, you can see how those statistics change. Would you send your children back to school with 3 feet of classroom social distancing, as well as appropriate precautions and PPE? That number is reduced to 38.9% here who say yes. The number who are not entirely sure is at 24.2%, and 37% of families said no, absolutely not. They would not send their kids back to school if they were only 3 feet of classroom social distancing. And then we asked them if they had answered yes to either one of those above questions, which model would they prefer? A full-time return to school seems to be the favored model at 46.2%. The hybrid model, where students are physically in school for partial days, for example, 3.5 hours, came in at 12.6%. An alternating hybrid model, where students are physically in school every other day with remote instruction delivered on the off days, was at 24.1%. And then an alternating hybrid model, where students are physically in school 1 week and receiving remote instruction during the off week, was at 17.1%. So that's the survey results from the great big survey that we had done. And now I will let Susan talk about health and safety that she had chaired.
Thank you. So our subcommittee met twice, and using the DESE initial reopening plan, basically it looks at that combination of strategies, which is the hand washing, hygiene and sanitizing, the social distancing, and the PPE, with that last caveat, of course, of staying home when sick. So the discussions really focused around those 3 strategies: the hygiene, social distancing, and the PPE. There was a recurring theme around education, and you can see with Dr. Kavanaugh having these weekly things, this is where the direction that we're going in terms of making sure to increase communication and education. The Department of Public Health, Sean McAuliffe, doing these HCAM things. All of this is geared toward increasing that education that people are really asking for. Staying home when sick, again, was emphasized, and with the primary goal, of course, of keeping the illness out of the schools in the first place. So looking at those 3 strategies, we went through each bucket, if you will. So for the hygiene, basically each classroom should offer those frequent hand washing opportunities and hand sanitizers. Teachers need to be comfortable with devoting time to hand washing and sanitizing, and staff will disinfect and sanitize high-touch areas multiple times a day and every night. With social distancing, you just saw the parent survey results. They're more comfortable with sending their student to school with that 6 feet. Districts ask, or DESE is also asking to really limit student movement and try to keep cohorts together. There'll be signs and visual markings that will assist in keeping the proper distancing, discouraging of mingling in shared spaces and materials, and trying to manage restroom traffic. Again, being able to have that social distance and appropriate space within a small confined area. For PPE, face masks and shields as needed and desired will be provided to and worn by all students and staff. with the exceptions for students with special needs or medical contraindications. The discussion was around ensuring communication and empathy around various students and different types of PPE that they may be wearing. And staff whose positions require close physical proximity will have sufficient robust PPE. Going back to the hygiene, the subcommittee has concerns about the aerosolization of the virus. And the district should strive to increase ventilation through proper management of the HVAC system and operational ability of the windows. And a cleaning process should be developed when students or staff must share desks or spaces during the day. For social distancing, again, students and staff should eat at their own desks and not share lunches or snacks. Consider the use of non-classroom spaces such as gyms, auditorium to assist with social distancing. And the district will continue to make decisions about additional square footage for personal space. For PPE, plexi shields have been installed in various areas throughout the district, and additional plexi shield requests will be evaluated as we continue to move along. Students and staff will also need mask breaks, which will work into the scheduling committee. And there should be educational messaging around the proper technique of wearing PPE, cleaning PPE, and just all aspects of how you handle PPE. And lastly, there was discussion of the possibility to eliminate as many touch points as possible. Is it possible to prop open the restroom entry doors as an example, if you're not compromising privacy, obviously? Just what can we do to be proactive? The drinking fountains will be shut down and families will be encouraged to send their student with water every day. And access to testing is still being explored by the DPH. For social distancing, the last thought was that any plan that we do come up with, we should be discussing that with our town safety departments, such as police and fire, for feedback.
Thank you, Susan. The other thing that we've talked an awful lot about, and so I thought it would be prudent to share this a little bit. When people are continuing to ask about 6 feet and 6 feet of personal space, I would like to point out here, this is a classroom at the Elmwood School. And you can see that this classroom is 26 by 30. So there's the length of the classroom, and you just plug this right into this dashboard provided to us by DESE. If we incorporate 2 feet of personal space and 6 feet of social distancing in this particular scenario, you can see up here that you get the 8 feet that would be distant between, I guess we could say maybe something like from nose to nose of each one of the students in this sort of fictional classroom right here. So in this particular drawing, you can see that we have 14 students in this drawing. But if we have to take out 2 students, for example, up here to put in a teacher desk, if you have an Elmwood classroom at 780 square feet and you're using 6 feet of social distancing and adding 2 feet of personal space and a teacher desk, you get 12 students in that classroom. Now, I want you to watch and see what happens when you reduce the personal space button to only 1 foot of personal space. So if we take this, and this is a really neat tool because it will sort of maximize the space you get, you can see we have the same exact dimensions. It's a 30 by 26 classroom, 780 square feet. With 1 foot of personal space and 6 feet of social distancing. So you're really about 7 feet of nose to nose for these students. That goes up to being able to fit 18 students in there, taking out 2 spaces for the teacher desk. You can see at the Elmwood School now, you'd be able to put 16 students in that particular classroom. So the issue of personal space, as people continue to ask about it, may or may not be achieved at 2 feet. But I think that as we look at these things, we can say that committing to, at least at the Elmwood School with 780 square feet, 1 foot of personal space would certainly allow for all of our student learners to fit into that classroom. There's also DESE recommendations to bring back all of your students on IEPs, students who are English learners. So if this classroom were to have, say, 12 students in there, but 4 students on IEPs, these kids would be coming to school every day. It makes me very comfortable that we could put 16 students in that classroom in Elmwood with 7 feet nose to nose. If we take a look at this drawing, this is a picture of Hopkinton High School. You can see it's a much larger classroom. It's 30 by 30, so we have 900 square feet here. If we're incorporating 2 feet of personal space and 6 feet of social distancing, we can put 16 students in here. Taking out 2 for the teacher desk, we would be down to 14. If we reduce that to 1 foot of personal space, we can get 20 students in there. Taking out 2 spaces for the teacher desk, we go up to 18 students in this particular classroom at Hopkinton High School. Now, and really there's great variation in high school. As we are thinking about high school classes, some classes are enrolled at 14 students, some classes are enrolled at 28 students. So if we are bringing in 50% of our kids, there's a particular comfort that you'd be able to fit them all into that classroom. And so Susan Rothermick, if you would talk just a little bit more about transportation, and then we can share some more data.
Yep. So the transportation subcommittee met one time. The committee agreed that the student and drivers should stay home if they're sick as being the most important tool, similar back to what we talked about with the health and safety. All the HPS riders should wear mask and face shield. The buses can run with 1 student per seat or 2 students if they're siblings. If more parents choose to drive their student, this will increase the traffic issue around the schools, although only half the students are coming each day, so we don't know exactly what that may look like. The bus should have their windows open at all times. There must be assigned seats within the bus. There was a discussion about bus monitors to ensure compliance around seating and PPE. However, the discussion further went on that the difficulty in hiring 31 monitors could be something that is insurmountable. And then lastly, creation of multiple entry and exit points for the students to access the building and the buses at the beginning and the end of the day, again, to maintain that social distancing. So while we had our meeting prior to DESE putting out any guidance, at the time we had talked about looking at 50% capacity and kind of limiting our ridership. So we really were not too far off with what came through.
Yeah, but what you're seeing on the screen right now is exactly what DESE has given to us, because Hopkinton has 77 passenger buses. You can see where we are if we are at 32% at the sort of elementary level. You'd have 25 students in there, and then it's hard to know how many siblings you'd have, but you can see each red dot is a place where we are putting 1 student in one of those 77 seats. I mean 25 seats. And people have asked what would happen if we decided not to do any transportation for our students in grades 7 to 12. The law does say that you have to transport kids in grades K to 6. So one of our surveys that went out asked about transportation. This particular first bar asked if you would need transportation for your student at Marathon. So that would have said, yes, I need transportation for my student at Marathon. And 226 students, well, 226 respondents said that. So I am assuming that's about 226 kids. In the Elmwood category, 302 people said yes, they would. At Hopkins, 334 said yes, they would. At the middle school, 381 said yes, they would. And at the high school, 268 students said yes, they would. So if we were just taking a look at these numbers in here coming out of the middle school, high school combination, and I realize many of those kids could be sixth graders in there. But what we're talking about probably, is 500 students that would need that transportation. And really, we've got to get our kids to school. There are many families in town that just don't have the ability to bus their own children. So we really are committed to ensuring that we are getting kids to school in those buses. That said, any family who is able to transport their own child, that would be super helpful. And you know that as you look at these numbers, really, they are probably going to be just about half of that each day if we are bringing in kids half time in some kind of a hybrid model. And we have 579 responses that said that they were still uncertain about transportation for the fall.
Sorry,
And
Dr. Kavanaugh, just back on that slide, just because the labels were off, what was the 1,149?
oh, I'm sorry, that was the I'm able to drive my own child. And then we had a question in there that also said, if you are able to drive your own child, how is that, or transport your own child, how is that going to happen? And there were choices such as, I have a car and I'm going to take my child is able to walk, cycle. I have a senior with a parking pass, those kinds of things were in there as well. In that one right there. So there are many families, as you can see, who are able to drive their own children. And our next meeting with the Reentry Advisory Group will be next Tuesday night, in anticipation of an initial submission due to DESE on the 31st. That was a lot.
So I'm acknowledging that we are well beyond where our agenda was, but this is a critical topic. So if we have to delay firming up liaison roles, for example, we can do that. I think we need to take the time on this. Are we all in agreement? Okay. So who would like to start with questions or comments for our esteemed guests? Joe, go ahead.
I have a question for Dr. Kavanaugh related to the elementary grades, because I think what I heard was that the health director had indicated that transmission levels amongst that age group were lower than older age groups. And then also related to elementary, it appeared that the committee honed right in on a hybrid model without, it appeared, maybe you can comment on that without looking at the full-time model. And I know there's questions about 6 feet versus 3 feet, but the American Academy of Pediatricians had talked about 3 feet may be enough if students are also wearing face coverings and are asymptomatic. I guess one way to ask the question is, what weight did surveys of parents' preference of 6 feet versus 3 feet have versus actual health expert knowledge of 6 feet, 3 feet? And if you can just comment in general about the elementary scheduling, full-time versus hybrid.
Sure. I think one of the other things that, is probably not mentioned in those slides is that we also have to remember that we have adults coming into those buildings. And so, we've got to remember that with the Hopkinton Teachers Association, all of this is technically a change of working conditions. So all of this has to be negotiated. And, the HTA has, and rightly so, has expressed great concerns for their membership. If we have folks that we want to bring back to school who, are, older people or people with underlying health conditions or people who are living with people who have underlying health conditions, the HTA has great concern for that. And I understand their concern. So they really preferred, also they've expressed great concern in having 6 feet of social distancing. So when I think taken all together, the parents who are fearful of anything less than 6 feet, and we had parents in our group who were and parents who were not. Parents in our group who were, chosen because they have children who have some kind of underlying health condition. The notion that we have teachers coming into our building each day. And many people said, even though the American pediatrics have said that it's 3 feet, that's really the first time that we've heard 3 feet. And, superintendents across the state have said to the commissioner, if you really wanted people considering 3 feet, the marketing should have been a whole lot better, I think, than it was. Because I think very fixed in people's minds is the notion that 6 feet is the amount of feet that's safe. You go into the grocery store, the dots are 6 feet apart. I mean, everywhere we've gone, it's been 6 feet. And suddenly the notion of 3 feet is out there, And then, of course, there's that study that one of our public commenters mentioned tonight that, recently came out of South Korea, was in the New York Times saying, yes, maybe these are kids who aren't, transmitting this virus to each other, but what we're finding now is they are carriers of that virus. So there's just been a lot of hesitation, and I think that at the end of the day, people wanted to err on the side of caution.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've considered all these questions and all these factors and beyond what we even can think of. But my concern is that we not be overly conservative beyond the reason of health experts,
Yes.
and the fact that there are downsides to kids only being in school 40% of the time too. So, but again, I understand there's a lot of factors, the transportation, the teachers union and all that. But the 3 feet, 6 feet to me is a health policy fact or reality versus people's perceptions or misperceptions. To me, it feels good to ask parents their opinion, for example, of transportation needs, but to ask parents their opinion of health policy is interesting, but I'd like us to rely on the health policy experts for that.
Sure. And if I can just talk a little bit about, why do we ask parents, would you send your kids back? When we get up to places like 33% of parents say, for example, wouldn't send their kids back, then we get to that place of, are we compromising the quality of instruction for those 33 because of the 3 feet, 6 feet differential? And you are right, Joe, the issue with transportation, if you're going to try to bring in all of our kids every day, we certainly would not be able to use the same transportation model we currently have, sharing buses between Marathon and Elmwood. There would just be way too many kids on the bus to even get close to 3 feet of social distancing.
Could I add one thing to this, just because I've been privy to some of those conversations?
Oh, yes, please.
It's important to remember that we will have some students and perhaps some teachers who cannot wear that cloth face covering. And so to protect their safety and the safety of others, we really need that 6-foot distance. And the health officials will agree about that you have to care for the most vulnerable. And if someone cannot cover the appropriate orifices in the CDC recommended way, for most people too, we have to be sensitive to that. And so in these conversations, we talked at length about these different scenarios and distances. We had the CEO of a local hospital on our group, and she was fabulous. She told us about the rate of transmission in the hospital corridors as they walked down and how they were able to control it. She talked about the real danger spot being the cafeteria in the hospital. So just so you know, I don't feel like we were swayed so much by survey results. We listened at length to Sean McAuliffe and to Kathy Bay, and we, people did their fair share of scientific research before we made those decisions. Not that we weren't listening to parents, but we thought about a lot of factors here.
Thank you. That helps.
So
Go ahead,
I
Leah.
have a question about transportation. Sorry, my dog is going off in the background. I understand how hard it'll be to get monitors for every bus. but are we really comfortable with the idea that, especially with the younger kids who are on a bus, that they're going to stay in the assigned places on the seats that they're given, and they're not going to like scooch over to be able to talk closer to each other, or with the bus driver being able to monitor every moment, right? So what concerns have been brought up there, and what other possible mitigating solutions have been talked about?
I will say that we haven't given up on it. We're just talking about it being quite the challenge. So we have not written it off as something that we will not do, but it will be a challenge. And you're right in terms of the little ones. They get on a bus and they get all wiggly in their seat. I think there may be a little less of that wiggle when they're not all smushed together where they have to jump around. And maybe just the fact of having half the capacity of children on a bus may, kind of downplay the amount of excitement. When there's 50, 60 little ones on a bus, that's pretty exciting. But when there's, maybe 20, while it's exciting, it's not as exciting. So again, we haven't given up on it, and there will be discussion with families about proper behavior on the bus. The drivers, when the kids get on the bus, even in a regular circumstance, when the kids sit down, they do remind them of proper behavior. Please stay in your seat, face forward, feet on the ground. So it's not an unusual conversation to hear from a bus driver either. So it will take education, but riding the bus every day on a normal day takes education.
Thank you very much.
Just to follow up on that, are we considering volunteers for monitors?
Again, we haven't really gotten there.
And I think if I could just talk to that very quickly, I think if there were going to be a volunteer, we would want it to be sort of the same person all the time, because one of the things that the department has asked us not to do is introduce, like, say, 10 different adults riding in one in the morning, one in the afternoon across 5 days, because that certainly introduces a better chance of contamination for the kids, or vice versa.
And I just wanted to add, I'm sure you saw on that slide that the windows will be kept open at all times. So there's going to be regal ventilation in that bus, howling gale, snowstorm. There's going to be a lot of air circulating there.
Yeah, I was thinking about the snowstorms when I was seeing the open windows.
Yeah, and as we talk about, school systems and the ability to pivot, information will continue to change, and we will have to continue to pivot and re-examine what we're doing based on the latest information. The information at first for a bus, as an example, was have your ventilation on full blast. Now they're saying, no, don't do that. So it continues to fluctuate. Keeping the windows open has stayed a constant, so we'll see.
I wasn't sure, Meg, if you were being facetious or not. I'm still getting to know your style. But now what you said, Susan, concerns me. So the guidance is that right? The guidance is to leave the windows open on the bus during the winter when we're trying to prevent, sniffles and colds and anything else?
And again, right now, Joe, what they are saying is have the windows open as much as possible. So if you're having a driving rainstorm and the kids are getting soaked, the windows aren't coming open. So,
Okay.
we'll pivot based on what we need to do.
Got it. Okay. Reason will prevail.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nancy, did you have any questions or comments for the crew?
Nope, thank you.
I think, I guess I have a bunch of questions, but just to sort of crystallize it down to one, since we have not a lot of time. I guess my one concern that I keep feeling, and I'm sure the committee has talked about this, is have we accurately evaluated the student experience during, what is it going to be like to be the student going through the day doing what we're asking them to do? And I had suggested, having maybe some students try it out. I volunteered. I would be happy to do that. I now hear that from the MASC call that Ashland has actually done this, where the select board and the school committee rode a bus and went to class. And, I'm sure it will all work out and kids adjust and staff adjust. But as I think about the day, what is a day going to feel like? And what does my life feel like when I'm wearing a mask? And I just would like to have us walk the walk before we ink the plan, just to make sure that it feels achievable. And I'm sure it is. I know there are a lot of smart people, smarter than me, on this committee, but as I think about the classroom diagrams, Dr. Kavanaugh, that you shared, at first I'm thinking, well, why do you need personal space? You don't really need you're already sitting down. But then I think, well, we're so unaccustomed to sitting in a seat anymore for 6 hours a day. We don't do this. This is not pedagogically where we go. We sit in groups, we stand, we perch, we sit on rugs, we talk, we get in circles, we do all the things that we do, which we're not doing. So when we talk about being in school, it's not in school of last year, it's in school of COVID times. And we have to make the best of it. But we're all sitting in our seats. So then what is the mechanism for the teacher who, as Meg pointed out, I think has concerns about his or her own safety? What is a mechanism for them to approach a student to provide individualized intervention or assistance? Can they come near the desk? Can they circulate? Do they need that personal space to walk between? Like, I'm sure I'm sure that you've thought about all of this, but I would just like to see us put ourselves through the paces for one day of what this would be like, and just feel it and just say, hey, this, what we think, this is great. But when we walk the walk, we realized it, this, that, or the other thing didn't work out. And I think to further inform that, or if that isn't possible, I guess I would ask, what are we seeing and learning from ESY? Because we actually have students coming in person, and I know we're learning from that, and teachers are learning from that, and the degree to which they can maintain that personal space. How long is the day for the kids? I don't know. Are they tolerating the mask well? Are they wearing them well? Are they comfortable with their space? Like, what are we learning, and how can we add to our criteria for evaluation the student experience and the staff experience as well?
Well, I know Dr. Zaleski has put out a survey to ask parents what they think of, sort of what's happening at ESY. At this point, I really only have anecdotal data. Some parents will email me and say, oh my gosh, ESY is fine, but what's going to happen when you have 300 students who get to that building? I don't want to sort of steal Mr. Bishop's thunder, but he has put together a tentative schedule right now for, what it would look like. And in between each class, he's got 15 minutes built in so kids can get up, and there will be, at that point in time, opportunity for a mask break. They might be able to kind of get outside. And really the 15 minutes allows for sort of a staggered arrival and departure. So maybe all the kids in wing A are going to have that opportunity now or maybe all of the freshmen would be able to do that, just so that we don't have all of those kids moving at once. The high school is a very big building, but we're still talking about 600 kids being in there on a given day. So how do we get them so that they enter? But I understand what you're saying. And really, after every hour, they have an opportunity to use the bathroom, stretch their legs, get outside, have a mask break, those kinds of things. We understand that for me as an adult, it's not comfortable to wear a mask all day. So I wouldn't want our kids to be, sort of tethered to the desk and forced to wear a mask without those opportunities to kind of breathe and stretch. In terms of instruction, we have places where there'll be kidney tables with, plexiglass in front. And, maybe our students are going to be able to be 3 feet away from the teacher with a mask and a shield and the face shield and the plexiglass. But all of that is really to be determined. When we think about the education of kids at the elementary level, so much of that, sort of one-to-one reading or small group reading or that kind of stuff really does happen in that close proximity. So yeah, we'll be, learning those things as we go. But I do understand what you're saying about what does it feel like to ride the bus, to go to class, and sit with a mask.
Yeah.
And I'll interject again to
Mhm.
add to this. I'm so sorry. I've been watching the ESY kids, and they've been doing some of their exercises outside,
Mm-hmm.
and they're wearing their masks, but they're still appropriately distanced. And I can't tell you what a delight it is to see these kids with kids. And even though you can't see most of their faces, you know that their eyes are smiling. And so I think it's been a real boon for our kids to be back together again. And because we abide by that 6 feet rule, I'm really not worried about somebody's, mask slipping off their nose for a few minutes. I don't think that's going to cause the downfall of Hopkinton. Watch me eat my words, right? um, but also about the masks, I think this is something that we'll find as we go along. I've noticed this too. It's very hard to understand what some people are saying when they have their masks on. So we might have to adjust as we go along, but I feel like we're going to have to do that anyway. Whatever we set up now, we're going to have to change probably by September, October. They have some really cool face shields with solid headgear so you could put your head through a wall as well as be protected from the coronavirus. Yes, Joe, this is my humor. I apologize. But I look forward to the more enhanced face shields because then you can see someone's expression. I worry about these kids who rely so much on someone's face. I've tried teaching with a mask and it's ridiculous. Oh, I shouldn't say that out loud. We got some obstacles ahead, guys. But you know what? We'll handle it.
So
Right. I don't disagree with any of that. And I think obviously this is not our normal. So, I think there's some bumper sticker or something, nobody's happy in a pandemic. I mean, it's a pandemic. Like, this is not great. So I get that. But I think I want to feel that our plan is setting our students up for success as much as possible and our teachers. I don't want people to feel like they were failing or they got in trouble a lot because they couldn't deal with the math. I just want to make sure that we've tried it out, and I think there are ways to try it out a little bit before we actually ink this plan. We are going to get through it. I also, to Joe's point earlier, I feel like it's so challenging. We're like standing on quicksand and data is changing by the day. And so now we are more aware of some of the studies out about transmission in under 10-year-olds. And it does kind of make you wonder, can we do something different for elementary? And, I'm kind of in the same sort of questioning mindset, Joe, as you about, the elementary, I kind of think of as different from secondary. And we seem to be doing that as one unit. And there are probably really good reasons for that. I think a lot of logistical reasons, among other things. But as the data changes, if there are more studies that substantiate the idea that under 10 you don't transmit, I mean, now they're varying studies, but if that becomes more the norm and we find that to truly be true, then maybe up through 5th grade or 4th grade we can do things full time. As long as we're flexible as we go forward, and this is probably why we're planning for 3 scenarios: full time, hybrid, and fully remote, so that we can pivot as the data changes. So much to
So,
consider.
I think Leah wanted to say something.
oh yeah, I just wanted to, well, first of all, support what Amanda was saying originally. I have the same sort of concerns, but it's more about setting the right expectation, right? So last night, one of the reasons I asked Dr. Kavanaugh to bring up what she had said about the elementary school classrooms again, about the fact that those colorful rugs need to leave the room, about the fact that the stations need to go out, is because you think about kindergarten, you think about first grade, and you think about these like bright, colorful experiences with a ton of kids getting together. And even if you're sort of hearing that they're going to be 3 feet apart and stuff, I think in your head, you're still kind of picturing the classroom the way the classroom normally is. And I think setting those expectations, being very clear about, this classroom is not going to be sort of what you expect. And I also do have some concern about teachers simply because, I was a trainer for a long time, and you read the room, right? I mean, that's a lot of what you do is you read the room. And so if somebody's covered, right, it's very hard to sort of tell how well engaged people are, how much they need help with a lesson or not, because you're always sort of reading the body language and the facial expression. So I'm a little concerned about our teachers too, just because this will be a little frustrating for them. And I'm concerned about hard of hearing because my husband's hard of hearing, and all these masks he reads lips, and it's really difficult. And so if we have kids or adults in the classroom who have those problems, like Meg was saying, I mean, that is a really difficult thing. I'm not against anything. I just feel like, these are things that have to be aired and talked about. And I'm probably a very cautious parent. I prefer the 6 feet because I know the 3 feet has to do with wearing a mask. So I agree that if you have 6 feet, then, if the masks come on and off, then it's not as much of a big deal, et cetera. So, yeah, it wasn't so much a question, just a support that we really need to make sure that people kind of feel the reality of what it's going to be and what the situation is going to entail.
So I just had one quick comment, if that's okay, Amanda. I know, all these emergency child care centers that popped up around the state, or they were existing, but some were at the YMCA, and I think there might have been a few others that were providing emergency child care throughout all of this, just really even through the height of it. It would be interesting to see if we could get any of the data from them on what their experience was with children wearing masks, and what their experience was with illness and other things that may have come up. So just something that occurred to me as we were talking about how kids would react.
Can I throw something in here? And I say this because my daughter is now the healthcare supervisor at the Framingham Y, and she's been doing care for first responders kids. And they've had no cases of COVID that she can think of. And when the kids are outside, they take their masks off, and as long as they keep their distance from each other. But some of the special needs kids or kids with medical needs have a face shield instead, even when they're inside. And that hasn't caused any problems so far. I mean, please note, this is totally anecdotal on my part. So looking for the research is better, but she's just right upstairs. So it's an easy source.
But I think that it may be anecdotal, but I think that kind of cumulatively, when we look at what happened across the state at centers like that, it would provide more data than what we're able to get just kind of looking at it, where we haven't had kids together in groups like the Y and other childcare providing for first responders have had.
I think it's a good idea. Any data we can get is great. It is a little different trying to study and learn a new concept than pass the time in a safe way in a child care setting or a camp. Like, you can have, it's more fun, it's a different kind of an activity, but I think certainly it's worth looking at. I don't know if we can get it. We are,
Amanda,
go ahead,
can I
Joe.
just say, Amanda, I think your whole point though was to imagine this from the student's point of view, and we adults who are doing all this discussion about our students, experience need that perspective, I think. And if there's a way that you could help us organize a walkthrough like the one you just mentioned from the student's point of view on the bus, walking into the school, into the classroom, so that we can test some of these things that we've mapped out here, that the groups mapped out for us, I think that would be valuable. We have to constantly remind ourselves this is the student experience here, and that's what this is all about. And also that with all this logistical stuff that we've asked our administrators and teachers to think about, we also need our school leadership to set the tone that these students have not just the need to keep a social distance and a mask, but they still have emotional and social needs, and most of all, we're a school, educational needs. And how do we set the right leadership tone that trickles down to the teachers to, amidst all this logistical stuff and operational stuff, to focus on those student needs too. So I think that walkthrough would be really critical if we can do that before school starts.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about that maybe.
I mean, we have students on our committee. Maybe we should employ them and put them to work.
Yeah. So we are a wee bit beyond our scheduled time, but I think this is obviously, like I said, really good discussion. For those who are watching who have questions, again, there's the Tuesday Hopkinton Hangout with Dr. Kavanaugh on HCAM. There's Wednesday afternoon at 1 p.m. School committee office hours. And then next Thursday, we will have the full presentation of the details that are being submitted to DESE at a dedicated school committee meeting. And after the presentation, there will be a public forum for exchange between the community and Dr. Kavanaugh and her staff, whoever else is presenting. So there are lots of opportunities to still get your thoughts across to the people who are making the plans. And we'll just keep the conversation going. And it's going to keep going after the 31st because those are tentative plans. And then, as we said, the data continues to emerge. Conditions continue to change. And we have until August 10th to come up with, right, Dr. Kavanaugh, our plan for the fall.
Mm-hmm. That's
so. There's still a lot of work to be done. And I just want to thank, again, Dr. Kavanaugh, you and Jen, Susan, and all the 36, and Meg, the 36 members on the committee. It's so much work. There's so many opinions. There's just not enough hard data. You're not given enough guidance, in my opinion, in some places, and we're just left to solve these problems to the best of our ability. And it's going to take a community effort. I continue to say, I said this at office hours as well. As we think about the conditions in the fall, it is going to take all of us as parents to monitor our kids and their health and not send kids to school if they are at all showing symptoms. We're going to have to work together. We may have to help each other out with transportation. We're just going to have to really be a community to solve this problem. I think you as administration, we as school committee, we're going to do the best we can, but there is no perfect solution, and it's just going to take a lot of continued patience and collaboration. And I know we can do it. And we have shown from the spring how flexible and responsive and adaptive our amazing teachers have been. And we are just going to have to keep the communication going and then adjust as we need to. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for indulging us for the community in this extra time. We are moving on to old business. We're going to look at policy JF, which is school admissions and residence requirements. And I think, Dr. Kavanaugh, you said you had a public comment about this as well.
I did. Let me pull that up. Came through to me from email. This public comment came from John Guarino, and he says, "Hi, Dr. Kavanaugh. I just reviewed the proposed changes to the residency policy. I am wondering why we are adding language that states a residency investigation could be initiated as a result of anonymous calls reporting suspected residency violations. I'm very concerned that anonymous reporting will lead to bad faith reporting, unfair targeting of certain groups, and ultimately racism and unequal, unfair enforcement. There is no way to ensure equity in enforcement of this policy without transparency. Strongly suggest that this should be removed from the policy update. Thank you very much, John R. Guarino."
So we did not, I think that I was at the last policy meeting quite a while back now when we first talked about this policy before the first reading. I don't remember a detailed discussion on that aspect of it. Did you have any thoughts on, based on experience, why that language is important?
I do. So the factors that may trigger an investigation include, but are not limited to. I'm not exactly sure where we found that, if it wasn't in another policy or maybe the MASC policy. I should research that, because I know that that was not our language. I know that we borrowed it from somewhere. But one of the reasons that we put it in there is that's occasionally we will get those kinds of calls, so you'll get a call that says, I know the lady who lives across the street from me is a grandmother, and her daughter lives over in you know Milford and drops her daughter off at the grandmother's house every day or whatever. Or sometimes we will get even a teacher who will say, I'm a teacher, but I don't want to get involved in this, but my student will tell me every day that she's living in Ashland, she doesn't live in Hopkinton anymore. So when we get those kinds of anonymous calls or reports, what we typically do is we ask our school resource officer to just sort of do a residency check. It's very easy to go to the house where the address of record is and knock on the front door and ask if that student is living there. It hasn't been my experience that it has become something that is bad faith reporting and targeting, but I don't want to say that it couldn't become that. So, it certainly could. But I think that we are, typically respectful in our work as we try to determine whether or not the person does or doesn't live in Hopkinton.
If it's okay, in the interest of time, I don't think we're in a place where we can vote on this tonight. I think I would like to make a recommendation, if the committee will agree, to send this back to the policy subcommittee working group to just take another look at the source of that language. And I believe that even as it's written, it says factors include but are not limited to. They're sort of examples. So I'm thinking that maybe the working group can take another look at this and the MASC model and come back to us, because I don't feel personally that we can vote quite yet on this.
So we have half of that working group. Are we going to get to that tonight?
Let's move along to that. Yes.
Okay, just a quick point of note. I do have a comment and a suggestion for a change for that policy. I'm okay doing that in the working group rather than here. I don't know how that works.
You go ahead, why don't you share it, and then we'll get it out there, and then we'll take it up to resolve with the working group.
Okay, so I was noticing that it said 3 documents, along with one of them being a purchase and sale agreement. I did ask Dr. Kavanaugh, because I was curious, normally you have a purchase and sale agreement. You don't necessarily live in the house yet, so how would you have the rest of those documents? And she clarified that normally what would happen is you would get the purchase and sale agreement, let's say, before the school year starts, and then you'd have 30 days to get the other 2 documents. So it seems to me that since that's a special case, perhaps it should be clarified, as well as what happens if you don't get the last 2 documents in those 30 days within the policy, so that it's spelled out clearly.
Okay, was that it? Did you have another?
Yeah,
one?
that was pretty much it.
That's good. That's good feedback. So, Dr. Kavanaugh, are you okay with taking that back?
Absolutely, yes.
Great. So that brings us to liaison roles. We're still a little bit late, but let's see what we can do. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Oops. Hang on. Can you see that? Are you looking at the grid?
Yes.
Okay. Alrighty. So what we have to do in some efficient manner is we have to sign up for a series of different liaison roles. We have, just to kind of overview, we have the core functions of the committee, which are up front. We have some voting memberships, which are required usually in the charter of the committees that we're voting on. They usually state we have to have a school committee member or whatever. We have one official school committee subcommittee, and then we have a bunch of liaison roles where we sit on other committees and commissions around town and from our school committee perspective, weigh in as appropriate. So let's start at the top and take it chunk by chunk. So my suggestion is for the core functions that we try to share the wealth. Some of these are naturally sort of aligned with the chair and the vice chair, and those I put already the X's in for the media spokesperson, the legislator liaison, and the budget advisory group. I think on the budget advisory group, I think there are usually two. I think it's usually the chair and the vice chair.
So actually, it usually is just one,
It's just
and
one.
that is usually the chair. I did fill in at the end of this year. I'm happy to do it with you if the select board will allow for two members. A couple of years ago, it came up, and the select board did not want two members from any committee. They just wanted the one. So that's something you can reach out and connect with them and kind of, I'll go if they will allow it. Otherwise I will entrust that to you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I misunderstood. I had thought that there was a dual role there. So I'm happy to do that. Looking forward to it, actually. And so in any place where the chair is typically the person to be the point, I put the alternate to be the vice chair, which seems sort of natural. Unless there's any objection to those three, I'd kind of like to leave those the way they are. And then among the other the sort of core work that we do, we have the policy working group we've talked about. Great committee, I highly recommend it. We have meeting minutes review. Again, this is just sort of keeping the business going of school committee. We have the procedures working group. This is as much or as little as we want it to be. It's focused on improving the way we do our jobs as school committee members. And then the website working group, I slightly renamed it from what it was. And this is looking at what is on the school committee homepage. So does anybody have any particular interest in any of the four of working groups? I see Meg's hand up.
Would love to do the policy review working group. I've been waiting for 2 years. So if you'll let me do it, I would love it.
It's not up to me. It's a group decision, but I mean, I think we need two people.
I would love it too, please. I actually, this was one of the things I ran on, was trying to get the wording in the policies to make sure that it was equitable. And so I would really appreciate being in the group and helping out, and hopefully if there are issues, being able to clean them up.
That's right, and paying attention to semicolons as well. That is not unimportant.
Joe and Nancy, were you also interested in the policy group?
That's fine. I'm
good.
fine with them doing that.
You're okay, Joe, with that? Okay, so congratulations, Meg and Leah. I think you'll be looking at the attendance policy, I hear. So I'll just mark, I'm just going to mark as we go. So I think you guys will be great, and it's very rewarding. So the minutes review, Jen just handled this so effortlessly. I don't really even know what she did. I know that Georgette, we never give Georgette enough credit. She makes the whole engine turn. She does really the yeoman's work of actually pulling the minutes out of our recordings and so forth. And then we have to, I think this person edits them and makes sure that they reflect that which we all recall as being true. So,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and takes the minutes for the executive sessions, which are not recorded.
Correct. Does anyone have a burning interest in minutes? There might be semicolons, Meg.
I would not say I have a burning interest in it, but if nobody else wants to do it, I am happy to take that on. It's not a huge time commitment for that.
Thanks, Nancy.
That sounds like Joe's not really looking for that one either. So, Nancy, I'm going to go ahead and put you in. And as always, if you're missing a meeting or you need a backup, you have team members who'll be with you.
Or if somebody changes their mind down the road, I am happy to share that.
Okay. Joe, do you have in terms of
I'll take the procedures, sure. Yeah.
Excellent. So with that, just kind of a heads up, we can talk offline too. There'd been some work already identifying some areas where we might want to sort of shore up how we go about doing things. Last year, we tackled the superintendent review. We've done some work, really Mina did a lot of work around new member orientation, but we can talk about other topics that need addressing.
Great, happy to.
And I put 2 there because I think as a working group, it's helpful to have 2 people working on this together. Does anybody else want to work on procedures? I'm happy to work on it with you if you want. I'm also interested.
I think that would be great. I mean, as you as chair, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, great. And then the website, does anybody have an interest in working on the content of the website? I definitely do, but I would share or welcome anyone else.
So this particular working group, around what times of the day would it meet? Just because since I work full time, and if there are people in the schools that need to be a part of it, and et cetera, it's difficult to meet during the day regularly.
Yeah, usually with a working group, it's typically just the 2 people on it, just getting some work done outside of the meetings to then bring back to the group. None of the working groups, I should say this, can really make decisions. It's just a working group to do some of the legwork so the committee can make an informed decision on whatever it is they've worked on. So for this, it's just really looking at the content and what we want to change on the website. That can be done anytime.
Okay, I would be interested in that.
Okay. If it doesn't work out, if anyone finds that these assignments get too burdensome or we haven't divided it up equitably, we can always revisit. All right, moving down to voting memberships. We have a bunch. The only block I've grayed out is Joe on the elementary school building committee because you can't do that. So we already have Dr. Kavanaugh going to the tech meetings, but we need a school committee member as well. I think that Meg has served bravely and done a fine job in the Irvine Tadaro committee. I think you said they didn't meet. Would you like to stay in that role, Meg?
Absolutely. I do an excellent job.
Okay, so we have Meg. Would anyone like to go to the tech meetings? Are those Friday mornings, Dr. Kavanaugh?
They are Friday mornings in Walpole at 8:15.
Like once a month? Once a quarter?
Once a month is correct.
Once a month. Okay. Does anyone, I guess, so Leah, you're out. It's a Friday morning.
Yeah, I have every other Friday off, but I couldn't guess that it was going to be the right Friday. So yes, definitely not me.
So Nancy or Meg or me, does anyone have an interest in?
I would be interested in that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
did somebody else say something? Meg, are you interested in that?
I teach on Fridays, so I'll be in Boston.
All right, Nancy, you got an X. Marathon Fund Committee? That was Jen, right?
That was Mina, actually.
Oh, Mina, okay.
That was Mina. I'd happily do that if no one else wants to.
I think that's a fun one, right?
Right, it's giving money away. What could be better than that?
Elementary School Building Committee, we need 2 members.
Let me just pitch that one. I believe we're going to have maybe one more meeting before we get to go close out with the state. So this is a light lift. But we like to have, by charter, it needs 2 people, a voted member and then a backup. And the reason I'm great is I'm already on it in a different capacity.
Yes.
I'm happy to jump on. I was an alternate before, so since I know the lay of the land a little bit.
I'm happy to take on alternate.
Is it also, so Meg, you'd be the voting member?
Sure.
And Leah, you would be okay. Excellent. I think we're moving right on. The Bridge Committee, Nancy, you have been the chair, founding member, and founder.
I would really like to keep that for another year, if that's okay with people. And then I would like to get it into a good place to pass it on next year.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Did we do turf field? Is that already listed?
Oh, I'm sorry. Nancy was a voting member and I just left you there. Sorry, I didn't,
Okay.
do we want to change that?
This is the turf field oversight. It does not, it meets every couple of months. It's setting policies. It's and oversight of the management of the turf field. It has nothing to do, it's a separate committee from the committee that actually kind of did the drive behind getting the turf field built.
Joe, are you interested in that?
Only if Nancy doesn't want to continue. Yeah.
I'm happy to continue, but if that's something that you have a drive to do.
No, sounds like you're
Okay.
doing a great job. Thank you. Happy to help if needed.
So I'm putting you back in there. Okay. All right. So that brings us down to the various committees. And I will say, apropos of what I spoke about earlier, we're going to hold off on assigning the Freedom Team. I know, Leah, you have interest and probably attended maybe the first meeting. But to make it official, we're just going to hold off till we get some guidance.
Yeah. I can keep attending as just a citizen, and then we can decide if I'll be a liaison or not.
Perfect. Okay. So Youth Commission, Meg, you've been doing that?
Yeah, problem is that the nights they meet are often conflict nights for me. So I don't know if anyone else, I mean, I'm happy to continue, but does anyone
What
else have an interest?
what nights do they meet?
Usually Wednesdays. But that might change. I don't know.
I would be interested if there's not somebody else. I don't want to, if somebody else, Leah, if that's something that you had interest in, I don't want to.
No, that's fine. I was trying to figure it out with the office hours and the Wednesday.
Oh, right.
I think office hours on Wednesdays are only going to go through the beginning of the school year, and then we'll relook at the schedule once we get through the reopening. But Meg, are you okay handing off to Nancy for a stint?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Great. Planning board. That's an important one. I should say I put myself down for the select board and the appropriation committee and the capital improvements committee, and I put Nancy to put you down as an alternate. I think that makes sense, aligned with the budget, unless somebody wants to share that. I would at least like to be the select board liaison, but I would be willing to talk about the other ones if someone had a strong opinion.
Those are typically done by the chair.
I'd be interested and willing to help with the growth study committee.
Nice. What night does the planning board meet? Is it?
You know, Jen did that one. I can't remember.
Can't remember either.
It used to be Mondays.
I think it's
Sure.
Mondays. Yeah, I feel like it's Mondays. Well, I'm holding on planning board for now. We have CPAC. Meg, you're stuck with the reentry advisory group till the end, till the bitter end. So you're still there. And then Hopkinton Organizing for Prevention, which I have been doing. I'm very happy to hand off on that, or I'm happy to continue. Doesn't matter. So who doesn't have a Leah? You don't have a honor roll.
No, yeah.
Would you like planning
Yeah.
board? Planning board, I think Jen monitored the agenda. She went in person when there were topics that overlapped or intersected with school committee, I think, and then just watched and stayed abreast of those meetings when there was not a direct tie to schools. I think
Okay,
that's
I can do that.
roughly.
Just saying that I would be at several meetings a week is difficult once I start actually going to work. But if it's, monitoring the agenda and then going every so often as it reflects school issues, then I can do that.
And I'll be happy to back you up if needed ever.
Okay, thank you.
That's helpful because things come up at night for sure. Does anyone have an interest in the Hopkinton Organizing for Prevention work?
That one is actually the one that I was looking at. When do they meet?
Typically during the day.
Okay.
It does vary, but typically during the day, mostly because there are school counselors and staff members on that, usually after school, like 2 to 4 or 2 to 3.
Okay. That makes sense.
Well, I'll stay there for now. If anybody wants to hand off or come along, I mean, it's an open meeting. Everyone's welcome. If you have an interest that develops, we can just go together and you can decide then. And the community communications group, I know Dr. Kavanaugh, you tend to go to those meetings. They're monthly. Is that right? Not monthly.
Until we had a pandemic, then they
Oh,
weren't
right.
at all.
So,
Yeah, we would alternate from Friday mornings to like Wednesday nights or something so that daytime people and nighttime people could attend.
anybody?
I wouldn't mind that.
Okay. Well, let's go with this. I think we covered everything. We'll all step back after this meeting and take another look. But let's start here. And if we find that it's just not working, please, I hope people will come forward and say, you know, my schedule has changed, that my time commitments have changed, and we'll share the wealth. Do we need to actually vote this? I believe we do.
Typically, we do vote it.
Are we comfortable voting it the way we just came up with it? Are we ready to vote? Does anyone want to make a motion?
I make a motion to accept the newly assigned liaison roles.
Second,
Motion by Meg, second by Nancy. I'll take a roll call vote. Leah,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Meg,
Aye.
Nancy,
yes.
and I'm an aye, and it passes. So we now have our new roles. Congratulations, everybody. Have fun. All right. Now we are, hold on. Oh, we're up to public comment. We have a second opportunity for public comment. Have there been any texts or emails that have come in?
I did receive another text from, oops, sorry, it's Ron Pryfer. And I'm just going to read what he said. He said, I would like to firstly congratulate you and your team for working so hard to attempt to develop a plan in addition to what was already accomplished last spring. These are not easy times by any stretch of the imagination. Being in academia myself and heavily involved in the teaching and researching of virology at my university, I have been privy to various options to help mitigate and assist in the decreased transmission of the disease. One proposal that has come out of Europe that was specifically pertaining to the workplace may actually be quite beneficial for our student population. In a nutshell, the idea would be to have the students on campus 1 week, followed by 2 weeks distance learning at home. The reason for this is that there is a typical gestation time of 2 weeks for the virus. Since most students infected will be asymptomatic, the chance of using temperature scanners at the door would not provide any information. However, the parents or guardians of these children would more likely be symptomatic. Thus, if a student goes home and during the 2 weeks they are distance learning, their parents become ill, it is a greater than 95% certainty that the child is or was a carrier. The added benefit is by having 3 cohorts that rotate out, space limitations within the building may be more easily managed compared to 1 week on and 1 week off. I would be more than willing to discuss further to provide my insight if that is something of interest to you. Again, thank you for your incredible hard work, and I hope for positive outcomes as we go forward.
Thank you, Nancy. Future agenda items. Does anyone have a future agenda item? I have 2 quick ones, both related to the resolution that we passed last meeting. In that resolution, it talks about professional development every year for the staff, including school committee. So at a future meeting, I'd like to talk about what type of anti-racism training, sensitivity training, and so forth we should look at among the group. So probably not till September, but that's sort of on my radar. And similarly, as I mentioned earlier, discussing the information that was provided about Edward Hopkins at a future meeting. I think that's going to have to wait till after we open the schools, but kind of looking at the fall for those.
And you've already listed the Freedom Team.
Sorry, and the Freedom Team, yeah. Any others?
Yeah, Amanda, I'd like to expand on one of those and maybe a different approach. The whole idea of the Hopkins legacy, right? And it's not just the school. For those who didn't notice, the town is also named after the same person. To me, it's really an opportunity to engage in a history discussion, to take it a little broader, right? And we have a great historical society in Hopkinton with some people very versed in the history of Hopkinton. And I would gather that, you know, most of the people or many of the people who read that article didn't even know who Edward Hopkins was. So it would be great to have kind of a historian view, local historian view. Again, I know we have a lot of other pressing business, but at some point in the fall when we are able to address this, take kind of a broader historical view and educate ourselves on not just that aspect of it, but who was Edward Hopkins? How did the town get formed? How did we name the school that way? How do we name schools? But just kind of to take this opportunity to uplift the discussion and increase our awareness of where did this town come from? And I think to have someone from the Historical Society could help elevate that discussion.
I think it's an excellent idea, definitely. Anything else on future agenda items? Okay, so items by consensus, Dr. Kavanaugh?
Or as superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Meg, second by Leah. Roll call vote. Leah?
Yes.
Joe?
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Nancy?
Yes.
And I'm an aye, so that passes. And I am looking for a motion to adjourn.
Oh, yes. I move to adjourn.
Motion by Meg,
I'll second that.
second by Nancy. I thought no one wanted to go for a minute. Second by Nancy. Roll call vote. Leah?
Yes.
Joe?
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Nancy?
Yes.
And I'm an aye as well. So we are adjourned at 9:15 p.m. Our next meeting is next Thursday, July 30th at 7 p.m. It's a special meeting focused on reopening the schools. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone for watching. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for all the good information.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Night,
Good
night.
night.
Bye.
Thanks.